microphone is yours.
Awesome, Chris. Thank you so much. I am so excited to be here. Y'all, I'm an ELC fellow twice over, having been at the Strategic Pathways back in 2016 and the Mid Level Manager Symposium that very same year. I am pleased to be with you today to talk about preparing for what's next with COVID 19. Now, you're probably COVID 19 out by now, but we need to think about this as professionals as we begin to look at what our next steps could look like. And you know what? As leaders, that's what we do. We read tea leaves. So we're going to do some of that today. This session will be very interactive. That means I want you to shout me out in the chat. So I'm going to be looking for you. There are 48 of you here right now. That number may grow, but I would love for you to engage with me in the chat room, and you can just call me by name and I will respond. I might just answer out loud. There probably won't be time to chat back, but there will be some pulse moments that we have throughout where I'll need each and every one of you to have something to write with, either a notepad or a journal, because the idea of this session is to make sure that you have the beginnings of an actual, actionable, strategic plan for moving forward through this crisis. So let's get going. A little bit about me. You know, I've been in and out of corporate America all of my 26 years. I'm a serial entrepreneur and intrapreneur, which means I've run to the risk outside of the companies that I've worked for, and I've run to the risk inside of the company, which is actually something that I encourage all professionals to do, to get a hold of that entrepreneurial spirit inside companies, if that's where you are, and of course for small business owners, that's for sure too. I'm a career elite communicator, 26 years as a strategic communicator and also integrated marketing. I've taken that and I've blended it with leadership and talent development because I believe that if you can't communicate, you can't lead. I have worked for a Fortune 10 expat, AT&T. You might have heard of a little company named AT&T. And I've been a VP and up for more than 15 years, an officer at global agencies, and supported the C-suite for most of my 20 years throughout. And then also started businesses during recessions. In fact, I started an agency in 2002. And if you do the math, that's just a year before 9/11. We're going to get back to 9/11 because it really jogs some memories and some lessons that we can learn in this situation, in this crisis. But ultimately, I'm dedicated to developing rockstar leaders that thrive at the intersection of tech, business, and culture. And you know what? We are now in a digital age more than ever. And if you haven't figured that out by now, you've been thrust into it. And we'll talk about using those weapons of mass innovation as we move forward. But you know what? Back to 9/11. But first, I look at the whole individual. There are people who will say that you are your personal brand and then your professional brand. At NSC Coaching, which is my company, we see it as all one person. You are one individual. And you know what? This crisis has really drawn this out for us because for many of us, work, home, school, family is all under one roof. But let's say if we go back into the workplace, you will take your personal self right into the workplace. There's no dividing the two. So we're going to talk about how you can manage all of that because your life impacts your career and your career impacts your life. Now, 9/11. How many of you remember where you were when this happened? I will tell you that I was driving down I-35 going north in Dallas, Texas, where I am right now, to my job where I had just made vice president before I was 30 years old, excuse me. I was 29 years old, made it before I was 30 at Ketchum Public Relations. We were to have an event that night, but I was concerned because our guests who were going to speak that night were literally in flight when I started to hear on K104 that something had happened. A plane had flown into one of the towers of the World Trade Center. Startled me. I don't know how you felt. You might have felt the same way. But first of all, I wanted to make sure that my spokespeople were okay. It was Keith Clinkscales. You may remember him. He's a media guru. He's the one that developed 40 Under 40 and his PR person. Well, we couldn't get in contact with the driver. And suddenly I was panicked. I wanted to know where they were. And then I started thinking, do we move forward with an event? The second plane hadn't hit the other tower yet. How many of you remember how you felt in that very moment? One thing that I understood about this moment was that it not just hit us emotionally and with lives lost, just like we are today. In fact, we're experiencing a 9/11 every day, they're telling us, with the loss of life. But this is the only crisis of this magnitude in our lifetime that we can recall. And there are some lessons there for us. But yeah, I see. Christina says she was scared. Yeah, absolutely. I was scared too. But this was a hit in the pocketbooks as much as it was a hit and a loss of life. This was the enemy's way of making sure the United States was crippled. And if you can recall, this was the first time in our lifetime that planes stopped flying. And while planes aren't grounded right now, that industry was getting hit so hard. Leah says she was working at American Airlines. She'll never forget that day. You know what, Leah? A lot of people won't, and I know that you won't. In fact, one of these articles that you'll see that's listed here, the Harvard Business Review, talks about the person who was actually over corporate communications at American Airlines that day. He was on his way to work, so you want to check that out. But there's some lessons here. One of the other articles that I'm sharing with you via a link is from the New York Times, and it's an opinion piece from an Army general and a former Navy SEAL. And they talk about the lessons they learned from 9/11. And I want you to take some notes on what really happened here. He talks about when crisis happens, it's not just a matter of when. It's going to happen. We didn't see COVID coming the way we should have, right? Now it's here, and it's what we call a smoldering crisis. Unlike 9/11, which was acute and sudden, boom, it happened in one day, and suddenly we had to deal with the outcomes. A smoldering crisis we don't really see the end of. And as leaders, we have to be visible, take action, and be adaptable. We've got to be honest too. And most of all, we've got to be compassionate. Leaders have to wield what I call, again, those weapons of mass innovation. This U.S. Army general and this Navy SEAL talked about the very first time that their team of thousands had to opt for video conference. Can't we relate? How many of you are glued to Zoom because of what's going on right now? Your screen time has increased 10 times. In fact, you're going to church online. You're in front of a screen all the time, and you're wondering, how do I lead? How do I push forward in this new digital age and be seen and be visible? And I'm just on my webcam. Well, we have some things that we can talk about here. Let's see what everybody's saying. Yes, Zoom, kaboom, Gail says. That's right, Zoom is everywhere. Smoldering crisis, and yeah, Deborah said lots of Zoom. How many of you are just worn out from Zoom? Let's keep going. So what's the state of our crisis right now? African Americans. You know what? I love this about ELC. They ask, what's Black about it? So we're going to start with that. African Americans are impacted more than anyone. Latinos are right there with us. Why? Because culturally, there's some things that we will not give up. How many of you still have folks over in the rural areas that are still determined to go to church? That's part of us. In Latino homes, you have multiple generations. So if granddad gets it, the baby may get it, right? It's also a fact that we're in the front lines. We're these essential workers that have to be there, that have to work, that have to keep going to deliver the groceries, whatever it might be. Nicole just said, Dad just got a haircut this week. I know. Look, I've got boomers at home, and I can't keep them at a Costco. What are y'all doing to keep your boomers in check? Yeah. 9/11 is happening every day. And you know what? I want to make sure we're going to talk about being traumatized. This is why we got to talk about the whole person. Unemployment rates are expected to surge to 23%. That's depression era unemployment. And currently we're at 14.7%. When I wrote this, we were at 13. And within days, we're at 14.7. It might rise again today. Corporations and private entities have led the way, and we saw Southwest by Southwest just shut down. It was a boss move when nobody else was thinking about closing anything down. But there were companies that were already banning travel. How many of you were already told, don't go anywhere? Let's see, Janice says, I thought I was the only one having problems keeping my boomer parents in check. No, girl, no, it's everywhere, okay? We just got my parents to purchase a washer dryer online. That was mammoth. They wanted to go see it in Costco. Okay, so workers are telecommuting. We're using Zoom. We're doing audio conferences. We're doing it all. Work and school have converged at home. Y'all, I have a 7-year-old. And she's in a private school and they're calling it e-learning. Yeah, right. It's homeschool. I'm paying for homeschool. And it's hard. It's hard. Universities moved to online instruction. I'm also an adjunct professor, so I got to look at these university kids in the face and see the fear. But you know what? Google was probably one of the first to say, you know what? To the end of the year, you work from home. I just understand that Twitter just made that announcement too, and some of the workers are talking about moving to other states that are more affordable. How many of you know what's about to happen at your jobs? Let's see, Corey says, travel is shut down in early March. Return to office is unknown, waiting to see how this impacts the kids' return to school. These are all real things, y'all. So today we're going to work through 4 different areas. 1, navigating uncertainty. We just don't know. Smoldering crisis gives us this air of uncertainty every day we wake up. Every night we go to bed, we just don't know what's next. So we'll learn how to insert our own bit of certainty into uncertainty. That's the key, y'all. Number 2, anticipate and act. We're going to do a lot of tea leaf reading, okay? Anticipate the challenges and issues and lead with intentionality. You've got to be intentional. And then 3, engaging your EQ. Now more than ever, you guys, you've got to understand the context in which you're operating, not just in the world, not just culturally, but then subculturally within your corporations, within your businesses, making sure that you understand how you cause other people to act and vice versa. And then a part of EQ, of course, is empathy. And we know from studies that when crisis happens, the best asset to have as a leader is to be empathetic. So let's take a pulse check. If you have your pen and paper, let's ask a few questions. And I really want you to think through these things. And if you want to shout out some things here in the chat, it'll be great because we can discuss it. But how are you feeling about the current state of life and work? What moving forward could look like? How are you feeling? Let's take that pulse check. I see Heather Woodard. Good to see you, Heather, from McDonald. Yes, not just today, but always intentionality. Empathy goes a long way. Yeah. Shannon says she's apprehensive. Christiana, anxious. Yeah, you're not alone.